I was saying that I am very happy to visit Milwaukee, which is not only a big city but also a city with a spiritual environment. Had a little drive around the city and it has given me that kind of a feeling. I am here for a few days in connection with these series of lectures on human awareness. The lectures have been given separate titles, but I propose to deal with them in such a way that the entire series will make a comprehensive study of the whole subject. So that if somebody is going through the entire series of lectures, you will be able to understand the totality of the subject from different angles. Today, the subject set for my lecture is Palmistry, Astrology and Numerology. This is an interesting subject because there are a number of palm readers, astrologers and numerologists in this part of the country. And indeed, this is one of those things which is becoming popular throughout the world. Somehow, people are very keen to know not only their own future, but the future of the country and the future of the world. And many of them want to know the future of their neighbors also. So this has become a popular pastime. Palm reading or palmistry is not considered much of a science. It is considered to be a social pastime. And people at evening parties sometimes entertain each other by palm reading. Very few people know that palm reading is in fact a science with considerable accuracy. I have been doing some sample palm reading in the last 10 or 15 years in this country, and people have recorded my readings on their tape recorders. And I have been visiting again and again, and I find people startled and surprised and astonished by the accuracy of those readings. Even I get startled sometimes by the accuracy of the readings, because one does not normally assume that these little lines on the palm of a hand can show so much about the nature of a person, about his past and about his future. And one can certainly not imagine that they can pinpoint with considerable accuracy the timing of various events in the life of a person. About 10 years ago, I conducted a class in palm reading for those who wanted to understand how the readings are done. It is a fairly accurate science in the sense that the lines have a direct correlation with events of a person's life. Why should the lines have any relation to a person's life is a matter of deep mystical study. Some of you may be interested in knowing how these lines are formed, and some of you may merely be interested in knowing if the lines mean anything. The lines are made on the palm of a child when the child is still unborn and is in the embryonic stage. Even at that stage, the destiny of a human being is recorded, and it is because of the life principle, the soul or the spirit or the astral body or life-giving body or sense-perception body, which a person gets in order to become living, that creates these lines. When the unborn child tries to clench his fists before he is born. This is the reason why these lines appear on the hand and on some other parts of the body also. On the hands they appear rather clearly because the clenching of the fists by the unborn embryo is responsible for setting up these patterns. The clenching of the fist takes place according to the type of life that is being imbibed in the body at that time. We believe, and it is for you to consider whether such a belief is justified or not, that a person brings a large part of his destiny with him at birth, which means the destiny is recorded even before a child is born. Then only a child can bring his destiny at birth. This recording of the destiny of a child before birth takes place when the child is still in the mother's womb, and these embryonic lines on the hands are formed depending upon the type of mind and memories that child is carrying at that time. We believe there is a reincarnation of the human body again and again. The same being takes on different human bodies, and therefore the previous memories of an experience are not lost when a person dies, but are carried forward through the astral body and its mind to the next human body. So when a child is to be born, he is carrying with him the memories of the previous life on his astral form, and that astral form gives the feelings and the impulses to the unborn child, which creates these lines on his hand. When a child is born, at birth only one can see the lines on his hand. I was not known to be a palm reader in this country, and for several years I delivered lectures on human awareness without anybody realizing I could also read the palm. This came up accidentally in Detroit, Michigan, when I made a simple observation that we carry our destinies in our palms at birth. And somebody who was the president of the Astrologers Association in that region, Michigan area, who was in the audience, asked this question, that if that were so, I should be able to read the palm of a newborn child. And I said, that can be done. He said, very few people can do it because the belief is that the lines on the palm are made much later. Anyway, a very small child of a few months of age was brought to me the next day, and I gave a reading for that little child. And those who had brought the child were full of smiles, and I thought they were full of smiles because of the good reading I had given, but the reason was different. The reason was that my reading was identical with the chart they had prepared on the basis of the astrological planetary positions and aspects at the time of birth of that child. The likeness of the two was so impressive for them that they did not wait but circulated the message all over, and I had to see a large number of people for palm readings the same day. And from that day I became a palm reader in this country, and I have been doing this on a limited scale during my visits over here. I have been able to see that there are certain correlations between the lines on the palm, the manner in which the mounds are made on the palm, the way these lines cut across each other, the way they form triangles and rectangles and other shapes, and the events of life. This is a matter of experience, that if you see again and again the same formation on the palm, and it tallies with the events of a person's life, then one can say these lines indicate that event in a person's life. So a record is being made continuously of these correlations as studied from actual palms. By now, I have seen several thousand palms, both in this country and in India and abroad elsewhere. And I have hardly found any case where the palms in their broad readings have not tallied with the actual events of life, which convinces me that this is like a science and its accuracy can be tested again and again. I will come back to palm reading in a little while after I have talked about astrology and numerology also. I will now take up numerology, or the science of numbers. Just like the palms have lines and diagrams and patterns which can be correlated with the lives of people, similarly, the numbers represent the geometrical position of the planets and other heavenly bodies in space. And at the time of birth, these positions seem to have a correlation with the events of the person who is born. These correlations give rise to the theory that the numbers can be read in different combinations to show the characteristics, the character, and the events of the life of a person. The science of numerology relies heavily on the science of numbers itself, which in turn relies heavily on geometrical figures and proportions that occur in nature. Whenever we have space and time, we have numbers. Wherever we have measurements, we have numbers. Whatever scale we adopt and whatever numbers we adopt, whatever system of numbers we adopt, we can find a certain pattern in these numbers, and these numbers again have a correlation with the events of life. So the science of numerology is only an extension of the same system by which the time-space measurements in the cosmos can be read to see the correlation with events in a person's life. Astrology is again the mother science of palm reading and of numerology. Astrology, in fact, is the basis of all these sciences. astrology is a much misunderstood science. Very few people know what astrology means. And that is why they are doing astrological practices only on the basis of practice, without knowing how astrology works. The word astrology comes from the logos of the astral world. It means the knowledge of the astral world. If one has knowledge of the astral world, then only one can know astrology. And this astrology has to be connected with that knowledge which exists at a level of consciousness above the physical world. The astral world does not mean the sky that we can see above in the heavens. It means the astral world which is above the physical world. And very few people have tried to study the astral world, but they jump straight on to astrology, with the result that the astrological predictions they make, or the astrological charts they prepare, or the horoscopes they cast, are based entirely upon the positioning of the physical planets of the existing universe. These planetary positions are only used to project the events of a person's life, and these constitute only a small part of the potential and possibility of astrology. In these, again like palm reading or like numerology, the correlation between different positions that planets and other heavenly bodies take in space and time can be pinned down, and their measurements reflect a certain correlation with the events of a person's life. It can happen that two persons may be born under the same planetary influences. It does not so happen. It can happen. It has hardly ever happened. Even a slight deviation in the pattern changes the entire set of measurements. If a person is born in this room at a particular time and another child is born in another room at the same time, the planetary position for the two children is different. It cannot be the same. And if two twins are born within a second of each other, their planetary positions are different. Because these heavenly bodies continue to move, and the position of the child where it is born in relation to the planetary position gives the correct horoscope or the correct astrological chart for that person. Therefore, no two people can have the same chart. It is just not possible, because no two people are born at the same place at the same time, not even twins. That is why the chart becomes unique for each individual human being. It is very difficult to draw an accurate chart of this kind, because we draw charts on the basis of a general surmise that people in a particular area would be having the same location. And we also try and give the timing in such a way which covers a large area. Whether we take the Eastern time or the Western time, Pacific time, it's a time that covers a large amount of area. The exact time would be indicated by the exact location of where the birth took place. Therefore, we have lot of inaccuracies in casting the chart, in casting the horoscope and preparing the chart and then interpreting it. If you want to have a finer interpretation, then the chart must be correctly prepared and the horoscope properly cast. This is almost always impossible to do. But before I go into this question of the proper casting of a horoscope, I would like to bring you back to the basic point I was making, that astrology is not the ology or the logos or the knowledge of only the planetary world. It is a knowledge of the astral world. What is the astral world? The astral world is the world of which this world is a copy. The world in which we live is a copy of the astral world. Now, it is very difficult for me to explain how a copy of a world can be made, except by giving you a little comparison with a dream world. When we go to sleep and have a dream, then we go into the dream world. We see people around in the dream, and we see a world around, we see houses, we move about in the dream. What world is that in which we are moving about in a dream? The dream world can be called a copy of this real world. In the same way, this real world which we are seeing now and experiencing is a copy of the astral world. Therefore, the astral world is the world in which the events take place, and we are seeing parts of those events in this world in our lifetime. The astral world holds the truth. It holds the reality. Whereas this world, physical world, only contains certain excerpts, certain extracts from that real world. It is just a few chapters taken out of the real world at the astral level of consciousness. To be a good astrologer, you must practice astrology at the astral level, which means you must have access to see what is going on at the astral level so far as this world is concerned. If you can have access to the astral level, you will make no mistakes in casting your horoscope or preparing your chart, because you are doing it directly from the source. The source of all this knowledge is the astral world. People have talked about an astral body and an astral world and astral projection. Any experience which they count as out-of-body experience is considered to be an astral experience. It is not always an astral experience. It can be a sub-astral experience or a dream experience. But if it is a genuine astral experience, then surely one who has access of out-of-body experience in the astral level of consciousness is an astrologer in the real sense. The original astrologers recorded their horoscopes and their predictions on that basis. In India, 10,000 years ago, one astrologer came. His name was Mr. Bhrigu. Mr. Bhrigu recorded the horoscopes of all people who are to be born and went on filling up page after page, second after second, what will happen thousands of years later. And he kept on saying, these are the things that will happen. He even predicted who will be the people who will come and read these old manuscripts, and the time when they will come and read the manuscript, what will be the situation. So he predicted this and left a huge amount of these manuscripts which have been copied from century after century and are now available in a number of places in India. Today's astrologers cannot prepare those readings and those horoscopes, and therefore they are retaining those copies, and wherever they can find the right timing and the right horoscope of a person who goes to see them, they produce what they call a patra. That means the old horoscope. And once they have taken out the old horoscope, they just read out from there what is already recorded. And what is recorded there says that I have predicted that in so many thousand years hence, a man with the name starting with P or B or L, whatever the first initial is, will come and ask for his horoscope, and that is the time when this horoscope will be found. And in this, the man will be wearing this kind of dress. He will come accompanied by so-and-so, and this is the story of his life. Then the horoscope goes on to describe the story of that man's life, his past, his present and his future. I have taken some friends from the United States to those places, and they were astonished how the names of places in this country are recorded there in advance thousands of years earlier. Now that is the kind of astrology which was practiced by astrologers at the astral level. Even today, there are some astrologers of that level, but very few. There are very few who can make a prediction based upon direct access to the source of all knowledge, the source of the world, the source that lies in the world from where this world is being created, from where this life is being created, which is the repository of all that happens here. Therefore, if you want to practice true astrology or want to have access to real knowledge of astrology, it is necessary to have access to the astral world or the astral level of experience. The astral level of experience is not that difficult to acquire. It is not easy, but not that difficult. The only thing is that we should be genuinely and sincerely interested in that kind of experience. For example, when we want to acquire knowledge about this world, we will go to no ends and take all the trouble and pain to go around finding out the sources of our knowledge. If we want to get knowledge of the astral world, we should put in the same kind of effort and we will get the results. Unfortunately, not many people put in the same effort. There is one reason why we do not go and have direct access to the astral world, and that is that the astral world cannot be gone through external space travel. It has to be gone through internal space travel. If we want to reach the astral world through external space travel, it will require a kind of vehicle which has not yet been designed. It will require movement at a speed which has not yet been achieved, and therefore it is not possible in the foreseeable future. But if one is willing to travel in the internal space, which means in the space created by consciousness, then one can have access to that world, just like one can have access to the dream world. For that purpose, one has to establish a contact with that part of our consciousness which is a link with the astral world. Now you know that consciousness in the human being operates from a center behind the eyes. The human body is designed in a very wonderful way and contains different centers of energy and consciousness from where we can have all the experiences that we want. It is within the human body that those centers lie from where those experiences can be obtained. The center behind the throat is called the dream center, and if we concentrate our attention at the throat center, we can have the kind of dream that we want, and we can know the nature of dreams. We can discover everything about the dream state and how dreams occur and what happens when we are dreaming, what is the basis for their pattern. If we concentrate our attention, that means place the consciousness at this focal point behind the throat. This throat center regulates the dream state. Similarly, the two eyes and the place between the two eyes regulate our awareness of the wakeful state of the physical level. And when we put our attention through the eyes and stay here, we get all the knowledge of this wakeful state. And we can have all the experience that is happening around us through this wakeful state of consciousness, through sense perceptions. In the same way, if we withdraw our attention behind the eyes, if these two fingers, the top of the fingers represent the two eyes, and I thought the middle point, the meeting point of these fingers is the place which I might call the third eye in this form, third eye, then this is the place behind the eyes. Just like that, if we can withdraw our attention to that point behind the eyes, then we are able to have direct access to the focal point of consciousness within our body, which opens access to the astral world. Therefore, astrology arises from the ability to have access to a focal point of consciousness within the human body, even in physical level. Even this physical body, while we are carrying it with us, has the potential and possibility of giving us knowledge and access to the astral world and astral experience behind the eyes. This may look a little simple. It is not so simple because when we try to withdraw our attention behind the eyes, there are a number of difficulties. The difficulties arise because of our habit of using our attention only outside the eyes. From birth till death, we are used to opening our eyes and taking our attention outside. When a child is born, the child's attention is divided between different parts of his focal points within the body, and he has access to all these areas of knowledge. After birth, when the child opens the eyes, we draw the attention of the child outside, and therefore the children gradually lose this access to this knowledge, and they are acquainted only with the knowledge of sense perceptions outside the body. We then continuously focus our attention outside the body. All the time, day and night in our life, we are using our human attention, our conscious attention outside the body. We look around outside, we listen outside, we touch outside, we smell outside, we taste outside, and our whole life becomes life of sense perceptions outside the body. Even when we want to be inside, we close our eyes and look at the darkness outside the body. We never really pull back our attention inside, and that is why it is sheer lack of this practice. It is a sheer habit of looking outside that prevents us from going inside. If we practice going inside, it is as easy as going outside. But we have not done so. Therefore, the difficulty arises if in our grown-up state somebody says, well, it is very simple, you withdraw your attention behind the eyes and look inward. We cannot do it because we have never done it. Therefore, it needs guidance, it needs a little practice. But with guidance and practice, anyone can do it. It is not something reserved for an exclusive group of people. Anybody can do it. All human beings have this facility, and all human beings have this potential. Even children have this potential. A child of 10 years can do it with as much facility as an old man of 90 years can do it. It is a complete natural process of using attention. We are today using our attention to locate different experiences outside. In the same way, we can use our attention to locate this astral experience from the focal point inside. This does not mean that when we will focus our attention inside, we will start seeing the inside of the brain. It does not mean that we will start seeing the inside of the head. It only means that when we will withdraw our attention to the point behind the eyes, we will open up the possibility of seeing with perceptions which we are not using today. Let us imagine that sense perceptions are different from the body. That is, the eyes can see not because the eyes have the power to see, because the power of seeing or that sense perception of sight is put into the eyes. How do we see anyway today? Let me take just one sense perception for example, and then this will also apply to the other sense perceptions. If we say we are seeing something, I am seeing these flowers, you are seeing these flowers. How do you see these flowers? The theory is that light which is on at this time is falling on these flowers and going in near parallel lines to the eyes. And it enters the eyes, and on the lens of the eye, it gets refracted and forms an image on the retina. And the retina then, through its rods and cones, carries the color and shape of this flower through the optic nerve to the brain center in the head, and the brain center, being conscious, gets the knowledge. These are the flowers lying here. This is how we see flowers. Now the point is that if the retina could make its own images without the flowers being here, we would still see the flowers exactly as they are, because the rest of the process is the same. On the other hand, if we were not conscious, but our eyes were open, and the retina was functioning, the brain was functioning, the rods and cones were functioning, we would not see the flowers, because we are not conscious. The whole line of perception must be open to see the flowers. It has been assumed in error that because the flowers are here, therefore we can see them. It is an error, but very few people will accept it because of the habit of seeing it like this. The truth is, because we can see the flowers, therefore the flowers are there. If we could not see them, they would not be there, even if they were really there. We are only seeing that world which comes within our sense perception. A question has been asked whether the causal direction is from the flowers to the head or from the head to the flowers. It is again proved by the dream experience that if I saw the same flowers in the dream, I would see them outside. But where would they be? They would be in the head. The mind would contain the picture of the flowers and I would see them outside. The seeing in the dream is the same as seeing here, but the flowers would not be real. Similarly, these flowers, whether they are real or not, can be seen from the astral level. The astral flowers are real, and these are not. These are like a dream. How do we find it? By withdrawing our attention to the same place from where the flowers are being seen, and we will find not only are the flowers being seen from there, they were seen in the astral form and are being projected out in this physical form, therefore the flowers are here. If we have real practice of withdrawing our attention behind the eyes to the focal point from where we can have this knowledge about the astral world, we will find that the astral world alone is real, and this is all being projected from there. And that is why we can predict what will happen. If a human being was entirely free, how could you make a prediction what will happen 5 years later or 10 years later? If everything was happening according to the time as we know it, from past, present and future, if things were really moving in time, how could there be any prediction at all, whether by astrology or by palm reading or by numerology? It would not be possible. That means a complete record of what is to happen is kept somewhere and has already happened. It is kept and has already happened at the astral level. And this physical level is a replay of what has already happened. It is a dream sequence of what has already happened. And that is why we can make a prediction. And that is how these correlations are established between astrology and what has already happened. Take the example of a movie picture we want to go and see. When we sit in the hall, we buy a ticket and sit in the hall and watch the screen. The movie starts and those people in the movie, the actors and actresses and characters, they come on the screen and we watch the story with great interest. We get emotionally involved. We say, what will happen next? When we say, what will happen next, we are just saying so for the sake of the story. Otherwise, what will happen next has happened in the film already loaded in the projector. And what will happen next has happened and is already in the film, and that alone will happen on the screen, nothing else. We cannot change the film at that time. The film has been already recorded, put in the projector, and is being seen on the screen at that time. This is a multi-dimensional screen around us today. And the projector is at the third eye focus behind the eyes in our head. Consciousness is projecting this image outside and we are seeing this whole world. The film is already loaded, therefore we know what the film is. If we have access to the projector within, we can say in advance what the film will be like. It is a replay. But if we do not have access, this looks like a new happening and looks like it is happening for the first time. It does not appear that it could have happened earlier, and it does not appear logical that one can predict what is going to happen. That is why there is a misunderstanding about astrology and these systems of telling the future, because we do not understand how these things which are going to happen have indeed already happened. A very interesting case took place in England. It is reported recently that one Mrs. Jones lived in the neighborhood of Mrs. Brown, and Mrs. Brown took up the morning newspaper and she saw in the obituary column that Mrs. Jones had passed away, died the previous night. The obituary notice was very short. It said Mrs. Jones has died. And Jones had a typing mistake, a printer's error, in the sense that the E in Jones, E was wrongly placed upside down. She noticed that and she was very sorry, because she was a friend. Mrs. Brown was a friend of that lady, Mrs. Jones. Shortly after that, Mrs. Smith turned up at the house of Mrs. Brown, and Mrs. Brown said, "Have you seen, Mrs. Smith, today's newspaper? What a sad news. Mrs. Jones died last night." And Mrs. Smith said, "Don't be silly. I have just come from her house and had a cup of coffee with her. Don't make such jokes. It is not nice." Mrs. Brown said, "But I have just seen in the newspaper somebody has played a very nasty trick and given such an advertisement in the paper which is not fair." She said, "Where is it?" So Mrs. Brown took up the same newspaper in which she had seen this notice about Mrs. Jones passing on, and she opened that page, but she could not find where she had read it. They scanned the whole newspaper, inch by inch, they could not find where that notice was. Ultimately, Mrs. Smith said, "I think, Mrs. Brown, you need some rest these days, and you better have some coffee or some sedative and rest. I think you're working too hard these days." She said, "What do you mean? Am I insane? Am I mad? I saw it with my own eyes. I just saw it 15 minutes back." But they could not find that printed notice in the newspaper which Mrs. Brown claimed she had seen with her own eyes. And Mrs. Jones was alive and kicking at that time in the neighborhood. But as it happened, that very night Mrs. Jones died after this incident. And when she died, the next morning the newspaper carried the news of her death, and it was at exactly the same place in the new newspaper of next day where Mrs. Brown saw it the previous day. And the E was inverted in the same way as it came in the printer's mistake, printer's devil next day. What does it mean? People have been investigating that case because none of them believed in religion or things being written in advance or astrology or anything. Yet it happened. It means that Mrs. Jones' death was known somewhere, that there will be a press notice in the newspaper was recorded somewhere, that the printer will make a mistake was also recorded somewhere, and Mrs. Brown by accident had access to that knowledge a day earlier. This means everything is recorded somewhere. Where is it recorded? Where did she see this? How could she see it? She saw it with these eyes, but sparked off by accident in the third eye center, from where she had an accidental view of next day through the astral form. Through the astral form, she could see next day, and therefore she saw it. And later on, when she came down on the physical without knowing it, she could not find that news. When next day it happened, then she discovered this is the same news which she had read a day earlier. But when she read, the printer had not even composed the news. The newspaper had not yet published it, but she had seen it at that time. The fact of the matter is that this whole life that we are seeing, from beginning to end, is pre-recorded, completely put on a cassette, put inside the third eye focus, and goes through on a replay, and we are now going through the replay of it, not the original play. This is not the original shooting of the film, this is a replay through the projector of that film. And that is why people can have access to that future knowledge, and therefore astrology became a very great science. And people with this kind of insight, with this kind of awareness at the astral level, were called astrologers. Now, of course, anybody who can cast a horoscope or prepare a chart is called an astrologer. But when astrology started, only such people were called astrologers who had access to a view of the future through the third eye center into the direct astral world. Now, it is of some significance here that the astral world does not have everything here, has only some portions which are relevant to us here. What are those portions? How is this life pattern made? Why do we come into contact with various people? Why do we marry A and B and have children, and we have friends, and we go to a certain location and do certain jobs? Why do these things happen? They do not happen by accident. They are happening by a set pattern depending upon what is going on in the real astral world. Very often what is going on in the real astral world is not reproduced here, but a reaction to that is reproduced here. Like what happens here is reproduced in reaction in the dream world. If we go to sleep tonight and have a dream, we can have many kinds of dreams. One of those could be that whatever we have been thinking and experiencing during the day comes back and continues in the dream state, which is a very ordinary dream, and mostly it is forgotten. But the more interesting dream would be that if a strong man like Professor Mueller were to come and hit me now, and I can't hit him back because he's strong, I could during the course of the night have a dream in which I hit him. I can hit him in the dream because I could not hit him while I was awake. In the same way, a lot of this world pattern, the pattern of our life here, is formed on the basis of what we have not done or not able to do in the astral world. So the astral world contains the real life story, and this world contains some of the extracts from that which highlight what we could not do there. Of course, later on we can complete the story at the astral level. Now, this astral level of existence is not unique to those people who can withdraw their attention to the third eye center and get it to the projector and know what is happening. It has to happen to all of us. The only point is it will happen when we die. When this show with this body finishes, we all move into that show of the real world. We wake up into the astral world and we see what is going on there. Only when we find that the astral world does not hold us long. We again go to sleep there and have a fresh incarnation, and we have a new physical world life. This pattern is going on all the time. Some people call that astral body and the astral world as soul and soul travel and spiritual world. These are words loosely used, otherwise that is not soul. That is not the spiritual world. It is only the world of reality in relation to this physical world. It is not the world where the soul or spirit can be understood. That will come much later. It's a different exercise to get onto the soul or spirit of a human being and to find out how one can reach higher spiritual regions. The astral world is the normal world into which we go and from which we are born again and again. It is the world in which all our events are held in a continuous stream, and these different bodies that we take here, we take one after the other. Therefore, we are all going to go there, but some of us can test it out. Otherwise, this statement has no meaning, that we will die and go there. Who will come back and tell us that he has gone there? By the time he is reborn in a new body, the new body is so small it cannot speak. When it grows up, it has forgotten. It is very difficult for a person through the process of rebirth to come and tell back. Some people by accident still tell when they are grown up. And we hear of stories of children coming up and telling us of their previous lives and previous births. But those are very rare stories. Anybody cannot remember the previous life and tell us. But the possibility of any one of us verifying this now is still there. We can, instead of dying, do what has been called die while living. That means while we are still living in this physical body, we can have the experience of dying and have access to the astral body and have access to the astral world. Now, one of the essentials of that is that we should simulate death. Whatever happens in death, in real death, if we can copy it, if we can simulate it, we can have a similar experience and have access to this astral world. What happens when a person dies? For those of you who have been to hospitals and seen people die, or even otherwise seen people who die and who can speak while they are dying, you know that when a person is dying, the consciousness part of that person undergoes this change, that first the person is conscious of the whole body, and as death occurs, the person becomes unconscious of his extremities. He becomes unconscious that he has any hands or feet. Later on, as the person is dying, he becomes unconscious of his legs and arms. He can still speak. He is still talking to you and says, I am unconscious of this. I cannot move my hands and feet. I do not know if I have them. He is still talking to you, but he is dying. After that, the person becomes almost unconscious of the whole body and can still speak to you and say, I am going. This is my last moment. I can't stay on any longer. After that, the person withdraws this life force or attention behind the eyes and goes, and then it is no longer linked with this physical body, and the person is called dead. This is what happens. Now, if we can simulate this whole thing, that means if a person can artificially, through a practice, withdraw attention so that the extremities become unconscious, and then the legs and arms become unconscious, then the body becomes unconscious, and yet you remain wakeful. If you can perform this simulated exercise, you can have the same experience as on death and yet not die. A person can therefore die while living. If he dies while living, he can have the same experience of the astral life which people have after death, and yet he can get back into the same body and tell people what happens after death. Therefore, there is a possibility of verifying the statements I am making here, or the statements that have been made by people who have had this experience. A person can therefore die while living. If he dies while living, he can have the same experience of the astral life which people have after death, and yet he can get back into the same body and tell people what happens after death. Therefore, there is a possibility of verifying the statements I am making here, or the statements that have been made by people who have had this experience, by simulating the death during life. And this can again be done by withdrawing attention. What is giving us our experience of our extremities and our body is the scattering or spread of attention. When this attention is withdrawn from the hands and feet and withdrawn towards the central part of the body and towards the head, when the attention is withdrawn by any form of exercise, meditation, sadhana, or any effort, any system, there are many systems. I could talk to you at length for the systems which can be adopted for withdrawing of the attention from the different parts of the body onto the head. When that is done, gradually the same experience comes, and when the attention is withdrawn from the throat above, one feels one is dead, and one segregates the power to see, the power to hear, the power to touch, taste and smell from the body, and one can see one's own physical body. Yet the body is alive. It is still breathing, it is still having all this circulation, it has still got the heartbeats on, it's got the brain functioning, but the power of sense perception gets segregated and you can see your own body by this exercise. A lot of people have done it. This is simpler to do. If you then withdraw your attention further, you get segregated and you are then watching this body with your astral form, and you are in the astral world. It is the same world from where you can get the knowledge of how this copy of this life has been made, how the projector has been loaded with that film. I have just given a little hint how astrologers originally functioned, how astrology came into being, how the science of telling the future had a very definite basis. And it is that basis which is still prevalent. What we are doing today is merely picking up some indicators that they have left and using the correlations with those indicators and making some wide and some vague predictions about the future. So true astrology must be understood by true astrologers of the astral level, and the others only copy them. Now I have said that astrology is the mother of foretelling. The palm reading, which I was telling earlier, is directly related to astrology because the lines correlate with the position of the planets and they correlate with what has already happened in the astral world. Similarly, the numbers have a direct bearance with anything that exists in time and space and can be subjected to measurement. It is subject to numbers. So numerology, palm reading and astrology all have their basis in the same knowledge. That knowledge has been lost except in very few people, and very few people have access to that knowledge, but the art remains and people are using the art of astrology, numerology and palm reading to make predictions for the future. Now when predictions are made from any one of these sciences, if you confine yourself to the predictions as have been shown by those who had access to the astral world, they come out true. If you make any guesswork beyond that, they do not come out true. So these are sciences which are spiritual sciences, and if one really wants to practice them, one has to practice the art of going into higher levels of consciousness. Thank you very much. If you have any questions to ask on the presentation, I shall be very glad to answer. There is a chance of altering it by re-shooting and re-filming it at the astral level. Then it comes back into the altered form. This is done by those who have access to that. They can reshoot that scene and change it. So the intervention, we call it the intervention in the affairs of this life are possible with the help of those who have their level of consciousness at the astral level. Yes. Well, it's a very good question, whether in the light of my statement that everything is pre-recorded, whether we have any free will or not. If we have full knowledge of what is going to happen, we have no free will. But if we have no knowledge, then we have free will. In fact, the free will is an illusion. It is not real, but it looks real. It looks so real that even when we want to accept free will or not to accept it, we do it out of free will. If somebody comes to me and says, I have found out I have no free will, and I ask him, are you saying this out of free will or no? So then we find out it is not easy to give up the illusion, the mistake that we have no free will. We may make a mistake that we have a free will, and we constantly make it. The point is that when you feel you can make a choice, when you are given options in life and different courses appear before you and you cannot decide, should I do this or should I do that? Then who can deny that you have a free will? Free will means having an option to go A or B, option to go west or east. If this option really comes, then you feel you have the free will. You have to decide. In fact, you cannot get out of free will. If somebody comes to me and says, I have found out the truth, there is no free will, I immediately order some tea or coffee, put 1 cup of each, and I say, will you have tea, coffee or neither? And whatever that person says out of free will. And if that person does not want to answer, that is also out of free will. I can catch a person in the free will if one denies there is any free will. How come, if there is really no free will, the illusion of free will is so strong? The reason is that the free will operates in a very interesting way, that what makes us choose between two courses? It is the choice that makes us have the experience of free will, but what makes us choose between tea and coffee? If I offer tea or coffee, you have a free will to take tea or coffee. Therefore you have the free choice. But there are certain factors of choice, certain things in our mind which consciously or unconsciously help us to select either tea or coffee. What are those factors which help us to make a choice? Those factors fall into two categories. A, hereditary factors. Through our genes, if the father, grandfather, great-grandfather were all tea drinkers, most likely you are likely to ask for tea. Not because you have a choice, but because they drank tea. This is one set of factors which helps in the choice. The second set of factors is environmental factors. You may have been exposed to friends who take coffee, and they have always been cultivating the taste of coffee. Therefore, you can ask for coffee. But the point I am making is that when you make a choice of tea or coffee, all the factors of choice, whether hereditary or environmental, are fixed. And with those set of factors, if you make an honest free choice, it will be only one choice. A choice that a computer can predict for you in advance if those very factors of choice are put into it. If that input is given to a computer, these are the factors of choice. What will this person take if given free will? The computer will say coffee. And you will say, let me think, let me decide, and you will say coffee. Which the computer has said earlier. Because you think you have free will, but the free will itself is being influenced by the factors of choice which are fixed. Why it still looks like free will is that the factors of choice are not known to us. We are ignorant what those factors of choice are. If we had knowledge, if we could know how we are choosing, we would know we have no free will. So long as we are ignorant, we have the feeling that we have a free will. So free will is a reality while we are still in the physical world. It becomes an illusion at the astral level. Yes. Yes, certainly. The movie is in fact the result of the laws of karma. The movie is a continuous movie. We just take a little strip out of it which is based upon action and reaction or karma. Yes, you could. I answered that. You could make a change at the point where you can interfere with action and reaction. The difficulty arises in understanding the law of karma or the law of action and reaction. How do you know a particular thing that is happening now is action or reaction? In this life, a certain thing happens. You run into a particular person and you want to marry. You feel like marrying. You don't know whether to marry or not to marry. Now you say, should I not? What is in the movie? Is it an action, new action, as a result of which I will come again to pay back the karma, or is it paying back already for past karma? Well, we distinguish between these two, and the Sanskrit words we use are that if it is a reaction or the reward or punishment of a previous action, then we call it pralabdha. Pralabdha means destiny, fate, predetermined fate with which you have come here, over which you have no control. But if you are creating a new karma, then we call it karaman. That means fresh action, the new determination. But most of the time we are confused whether things that are happening around us are the destiny of a previous action or are new actions which will create a destiny in the future. The distinction is not difficult to make. There is a difference, qualitative difference in the two. Since both are based on the illusion of free will, the previous destiny comes up without giving us a chance to have two options. When you find you have no choice and you are thrown into a situation and you have to do a thing without any choice, the choice comes after the thing has been done. That is previous action. It's the reaction to a previous action. But when a choice comes before us and we are given the option to use free will or the illusion of free will, this or that, and the mind determines this, applies its mind to it. If what is to be done, then it is a new action. So that is the distinction between the two. If a person avoids new action but continues to pay off the previous karma, the movie sooner or later will end. There will be no more movie. Yes, you should never give up. If you want to go through this process of evolution or progress, eventually the whole concept is that the astral form contains the mind and soul of the being and is progressing. It is evolving into something better and better. To evolve, you should never give up, because this, what is coming as destiny, has to be played through. Karma has to be gone through. Therefore, never give up, but overcome it. One gentleman who used to lecture in this country, an Indian, Dr. Thind, he used to lecture in California, and he went to India also, then he's passed on now. He used to say beautifully, he says, why are we evading our problems? Problems and difficulties will always come. We should not run away from them. So he prescribed a 3-point method. He said, when a problem comes, first greet it, then meet it, then beat it. Don't run away. Greet it, say, come on, good morning, problem. I want to meet you. Then you meet the problem, understand it, and beat it. That's the way to handle. If you run away from a problem, the problem runs after you. But if you face it squarely and meet it and tackle it to the best of your ability, you are on top of the problem. Yes, that's a good question. Name. The name of a person has significance like the numbers in numerology. And the name also has the same connection. Sometimes change of name can affect the destiny and character of a person. And there it is used. But the basis of this is quite different. The basis of the name being relevant to a person's destiny is that the name has been used in the sense of the higher word, higher name or higher word at the astral region. The name, in fact, represents a state of consciousness above the physical. Originally, when the propounders of this theory came up with name, that you must be given a new name. And this was done by the old mystics in India at the time of initiation. When they initiated a person into the spiritual process and said, now you can make progress and grow, they used to give a new name. And that name changed their entire destiny. But the name they gave was not merely the change of their name by which the person is called here. It was a name in the form of a mantra, which altered their status and their consciousness, because that linked them with the higher level of consciousness. Now I'll tell you how this happens. When we use words, names are also words. When we use words, they have the same meaning which occurs to us because of our previous experience of those words. Words are phonetic symbols having connotation based upon the previous association of ideas with those phonetic symbols. If I say this is a chair, then why I call it a chair is because I have heard the sound chair in relation to things which I have seen on which one can sit, which have some legs and so on. That experience of mine, of all the chairs I have seen so far, accumulates and gives a certain meaning to the word chair when I speak it. Now when I say chair, I believe everybody has understood the same chair. It is not true. Everybody has understood the chair which he or she has seen. So everybody has its own connotation of the word chair. Now when I use the word chair, I am using my chair, you are using your chairs. If the chairs happen to be the same, we can communicate with each other. But when a master, a mystic, a person who has got a higher level of consciousness or who has access to higher level of consciousness, he uses a word in relation to his experience at that level, then the meaning of that word is higher because he is associating it with that level. The name used to be given in relation to that higher level, and it altered the destiny of the person. A mantra was also given. After all, to control the mind and to withdraw attention, some words were used for repetition. You repeat the words, go on repeating the words, it will be easy to withdraw your attention, because the mind which is thinking in words will not be able to think and will go on repeating other words instead of its thoughts. So words were used. Any words could be used. But instead of using any words, these people used to give words which had connotation in the mystic's experience with a higher level of consciousness. The result was, when the practitioner began to use those words which are called mantras, they became magical words, because their meaning was associated with the astral experience. And that is why they said the name is of great importance. The name started from there, later on it was associated with the external name given to the body. The external name given to the body is not the name of the person. In our philosophy, which believes in reincarnation, we believe that a person is born again and again, but the name is given only to the body, not to that person. The person who is reborn gets a new name because of the new body. And we identify ourselves so much with the body that we don't believe in reincarnation. If we did, we would not say, this is my name. I would say, this is Ishwar. Puri is not my name, it's the name of my body. And if my father was standing here, I would not say, that's my father. I would say, that's my body's father. It's a correct statement. Because I had fathers in different forms. And it is only this body which had that parental relationship. If I had my son standing, I would say, this is my body's son. But we don't say so because we have lost our real identity and we identify ourselves completely with the body. And that is why all these other mistakes take place. The name was associated with the spirit and not with the body. And that name was different from the name we give to the body. But currently I find people are using the same philosophy in a modified, diluted form and less effective form by changing the name of the body. That is not so useful as giving the name which has a connotation at the astral level and therefore changes your destiny. That name which changes your destiny can only be given by an expert who has had access, personal access to the astral level of consciousness. Yes? No, we don't. That is chosen by our previous actions. If by choice you mean previous actions, yes, we had a choice in our previous actions. But now we have lost the choice, but because of previous actions, we got those parents. So when a child is born, child has no choice of choosing the parents. Yes? Yes, it is theoretically possible that if we don't keep on making the progress we are making, we can regress to lower forms. But normally it should not happen, because normally we are in the process of evolution and we should go on to higher forms. But some people don't like progress, they can regress to a lower form. Lower than human forms. Lower than human forms. Yes, they do. Yes, the new karma is affected by that. Now I would like to clarify, because of this question, that karma has nothing to do with the body. Karma is created, generated only in the mind. The mind alone creates karma, the mind alone repays karma, the mind alone has the pralabdha, the destiny karma, the mind alone has the new karma. Karma is a mental activity, not physical. But the mind's decisions, the mind's karma creates the body conditions. So anything that influences the mind influences karma. Thank you very much.